Welcome to celebrating the life of Sarah Jane Farmer. This is a very special and unusual Green Acre event. Of course, since the pandemic, Green Acre has moved almost all of our programming now online, and soon we shall be opening back up, we hope, in person. But this has been quite the learning experience, and it's also extended our reach and the ability of people to come and join us. And for that, we're very grateful because Green Acre Virtual is wherever you are. Physical Green Acre, if you've never been here, we are on the banks of the beautiful Piscataqua River in Elliott, Maine, right on the border with New Hampshire. This area is the homeland of the Abenaki people. And the Piscataqua, the river, it means meeting of the waters. And if you don't know, Green Acre sits up on a hill overlooking this river. And this river, if you hold out your hand like this, there's actually 5 rivers that all empty into the Piscataqua to the ocean. So if you were on any one of those rivers and you wanted to get to the ocean, you had to come right by Green Acre. So for a very long time, folks have been coming this way. And we hope, of course, that that will continue for a very long time. And like the meeting of those 5 different rivers, this is a meeting place for all different kinds of people from all over the world. And one of our main missions is really to work for the establishment of the unity of mankind and the oneness of humanity, which we know is a spiritual reality, but not yet a social reality. So we are working on that here at Green Acre. I'm sure that you all are in your own way as well. So I wanted to let you know that after tonight's program, there will be a time for Q&A with Dr. Ann Perry. And if you move your cursor a bit, you'll see that several icons appear at the bottom of your Zoom screen, one of which is a Q&A icon. If at any time during tonight's program you think of a question that you would like to ask Ann, just go ahead and put it in there. So click on it and you'll have a place to type in there. I really encourage you also to share your thoughts, your musings, reflections in the chat, which you can also find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. But please make sure to put your questions in the Q&A icon and not the chat, as they can easily become lost. So friends, tonight we celebrate the birthday of the visionary founder of Green Acre, Sarah Farmer, in a program that will include music, stories, film, drama. We're very happy to have Dr. Ann Perry share her thoughts on this occasion. And those thoughts will be interwoven with quotes, stories, explanations by the other friends that you see here on the screen, followed by a short film by Tim and Ann Perry. And then, who knows, maybe Sarah Farmer herself may magically somehow appear. And then we will open the floor to Q&A. So before Ann begins, I'd like to formally introduce her. Ann Gordon Perry has a PhD in aesthetic studies and teaches at the Art Institute of Dallas and through the Wilmette Institute. Her various arts include writing, drama, glass fusion, dance, and filmmaking. The primary author and editor of Green Acre on the Piscataqua, which is a fantastic book. She has also published books for young readers, including Unseen Witness, Sarah Farmer and the Portsmouth Peace Treaty, and an article about Sarah Farmer for Baha'i Teachings called A Woman's Place at the Peace Table. With her husband, Tim, she is currently working on a film about Abdu'l-Bahá in France. And with that, I am very happy to welcome Dr. Ann Perry.
Thank you so much, Jessica, Frank, Robert, and Green Acre for inviting me to be part of this wonderful celebration for Sarah's birthday. Yay. As mentioned, during my talk, I'll be calling upon various people to share insights, read tributes, or quotes. So many of you have read Green Acre on the Piscataqua and already know much about Sarah Farmer, her relationship to Green Acre and to Abdu'l-Bahá, the son of the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. And tonight I hope to share some things you probably don't know about her and some tributes you may not have heard yet, read or seen in our short film. I've actually written a new book about her for young people, so some of what I share will be from that. But I'll start with one tidbit from a book called Abdu'l-Bahá in France. In January 1913, after Abdu'l-Bahá had traveled in the US and had been to Green Acre, he was back in Paris and many people had come to see him, including unspecified friends of Sarah's. When they were presented to him, he inquired about her and then said,
"Whoever is kind to Miss Farmer is kind to me. And whoever loves Miss Farmer loves me."
So we might ponder that as we think about both of them tonight. Sarah Farmer was really unique in so many ways. Born in Dover, New Hampshire, she spent much of her growing up years in Salem, Massachusetts. So this next part is actually from my new book. The Farmers were permissive with their daughter, but strict in a religious way. For example, Sarah was not allowed to dress her dolls on Sunday. One day, Hannah found her putting on their coats and asked her what she was doing, and she replied that they were all going to Sabbath school. Many visitors came to their home, Eden Home, and it became a familiar name to many in Salem. Hannah admired beauty and grace. She had a cheerful parlor with a red and green carpet. An open field lay in front of the home where they had a fine view of sunsets. Hannah recalled,
"No home on earth can ever be to me what Eden was."
Moses often played the piano, but even more often was absorbed in his scientific explorations. Hannah said that her faith in his final success was absolute, yet they did not seek worldly reward or recognition. Later, she wrote,
"You will not wonder that when the glittering prize was within our reach, we could give it up to God and the world without even a wish to be linked with it."
Sarah spent her teenage years in Salem. She was smart and well-liked, and at graduation served as the valedictorian of her high school. A schoolmate said of her,
"He was a brilliant conversationalist, always taking the lead and delving into everything. Vivacious, the center of the group, having radiance, friendly with everyone, not given to feminine vanities. In leisure time, preferring the study of languages to sewing or knitting."
during her adolescence, Sarah had one long illness that gave the family reason to give up a college education for her, but she continued her studies with the help of tutors. From her youngest days, she participated in adult discussions on far-ranging topics, and the family enjoyed lively interactions with a variety of people. Sarah helped her father in his work and learned several foreign languages, particularly German. She also pursued romantic literature, especially the poetry of Tennyson, and religious philosophy. Now I'm going to jump past the chapter about their life in Newport, Rhode Island, to when she moved to Elliott, Maine. Compared to her full, rich life in Newport, Elliott seemed dull indeed to Sarah, who considered it a wasteland. Where were her friends and suitors? The artistic and educational events and lectures she had enjoyed, the dress-up occasions. What was she going to do in Elliott? And of course, the rest is a very special part of history. So as a young woman, Sarah had suitors, educational and cultural advantages, loving parents, and an inquiring mind. It is not known why she never married, although she was engaged to Francis Keefe for a time, and some of her business partners in the Elliott Hotel venture expressed being in love with her. I think she felt a tremendous interest and responsibility in helping her father with his inventions, in caring for her parents when they were elderly and ill, and in nurturing her child, Green Acre. Sarah's cousin, Helen Green, remembers.
"She was very beautiful, very regal. Her voice was most attractive, soft, gentle, expressive, yet convincing. She lived a varied life in different communities. Her dress was very distinctive, individualistic, dressed in a Quaker gray veil and kerchief and white dresses. Personality was charming. With her radiance, she got what she went after. Because of her charm and personality, no one could ever say no to her. She expressed to people great love. She was a gentle person, her kindness personified, very thoughtful. She had a beautiful Persian cat, also a dog. She was a tireless worker day and night, always kept pad and pencil beside her bed. She loved children. She always said that Green Acre was her child. Never did I hear any members of my family say one thing in criticism of the perfection and moral uprightness of her character.
I don't know what her cat's name was, but does anyone know what her dog's name was? I see it in the chat. Barry. Roseanne responded. Okay. Barry was her dog's name. He's here in this portrait of Sarah in the Elliott Library. Now, here's a further description of Sarah from a Baha'i who wrote her impressions in 1941, Miriam Haney.
I well remember the profound impression she made upon me, a lasting impression. She seemed such a dominant figure, such an unusually strong character, so forceful, so brilliant, so set apart from the crowd, and yet always in the midst of the crowd, mingling with her fellow human beings for the purpose of uplifting them and serving them. When she was addressing the public, no matter who might be participating in the program, she was the commanding figure, full of fire and enthusiasm. I had never met anyone anything like her. I cannot recall anyone who was comparable to her in her own beautiful and efficient and whole-souled manner of serving others. She was unique. The mark of distinction was upon her, strong physically, mentally, and spiritually, with outstanding executive ability. There was something about Sarah Farmer that was different. Perhaps it was because the Holy Spirit was surrounding her always. I cannot describe that appealing and charming atmosphere I always felt around her. I believe with all my heart that she was called and that her mission in life was to further the cause of Baha'u'llah, which she certainly did. Years have passed since those days, yet the beauty and purity of the Lady in Gray remain fresh in my memory. Her reliance on God was unfaltering. She had the inner enrichment, and therefore she was great-hearted. Sweet and precious memories cling to me ever, and I shall always cherish those qualities of the Spirit which she manifested abundantly.
Author and educator Stanwood Cobb said,
Sarah Jane Farmer was a genius along a line unfortunately all too rare in human nature. She was a spiritual genius. Call her a saint or seer as you will. She was something of both.
Writer Horace Hawley summed up Sarah's place in American history.
A consecrated pioneer to make a definite and practical application of ideals hitherto existing only in the minds of philosophers and the lives of saints. Miss Farmer can be considered as the feminine counterpart of Ralph Waldo Emerson, for she possessed his idealism to the full, but her nature was executive, practical, and intensely human, desiring tangible results above abstract formulas and definitions. Green Acre consequently arose as the effort to live out and apply the great American vision of truth, justice, and righteousness, and has never lost sight of that essential purpose. The spiritual legacy left by Miss Farmer in Green Acre represents a truly astonishing achievement. To this woman of pure New England stock must be credited the glory of founding the first universal platform in America.
So, from women's rights and racial unity to religious tolerance, Sarah's work epitomized the progressive forces welling up in America. Though relatively little known today, it was a captivating figure because of her connection to the Portsmouth Peace Treaty, interfaith dialogue, adult education, her passion for peace, and her unique service to the faith. As Douglas Martin wrote,
No other resource available to the early Baha'is was comparable to the Green Acre Forum. there is no evidence that any other influential believer had the range of interests and background that Sarah brought to the faith.
In 1903, an article in the Boston Sunday Journal stated,
Years ago, intellectual Boston would have gone out to Concord for spiritual regeneration at the feet of the good, sweet poets and philosophers who lived there. Today, the inner circle of intellectual Boston goes to Green Acre to sit at the feet of the gentle and wonderful prophetess priestess Sarah Jane Farmer.
so we know she was an astonishing personality and force in her day, and that according to eyewitness accounts, Abdu'l-Bahá said she will be revered above all American women someday, and that she will become the envy of the queens of all regions and will be the rival of all the celebrated people of the world. So now a bit about her relationship to Abdu'l-Bahá and why he may have made these statements about her. We know she was designated as a disciple of Abdu'l-Bahá. And to explain more about what this means, I've invited Dr. Robert Stockman to share a few words with us. Rob?
Well, as you probably know, Shoghi Effendi identified 19 believers as being disciples of Abdu'l-Bahá. This is in many ways comparable to later or earlier designations of apostles of Baha'u'llah and the apostles of Abdu'l-Bahá. I'm sorry, no, the disciples of Abdu'l-Bahá. The apostles of Baha'u'llah was a sort of earlier equivalent. And has compiled some statistics on these individuals that I can mention very quickly. Of these 19, 15 came from the United States. One was Canadian, one was French, one was German, and one was Scottish by birth, that is. 4 of them were physicians. And of course, in those days, being a physician was one of the few ways people got a fairly advanced education. So that reflects something about their education as well. 6 were female, 13 were male. And considering how active the women were in America, it's actually a pretty good ratio because men tended to dominate everything in those days. One, of course, was African American, and that's Robert Turner, and we have a picture of him right there. Of the 19, 12 declared during the 19th century, so they were quite early. The others later on, and I suspect Harry Randall may have been just about the last one. Here we have their names, and I'll mention a couple of them very briefly just to give you a focus on a few of them. Certainly my favorite is Thornton Chase, who became a Baha'i in 1894 and is usually considered to be the first Baha'i in the United States. He was certainly one of the first 5, and the others all wandered out of the community later. And he was also a New Englander. He came to Green Acre frequently. His life insurance company was based in Portland, Maine, and so he came up to Portland every summer to go to the headquarters of Lincoln, the Union Mutual Life Insurance Company. And then his family would go on vacation to Alan-Quippa House on one of the islands, actually a peninsula of the Maine coast, and he would then go down and spend usually a week at Green Acre as well. Remarkable Baha'i. There's a whole book about him, so I won't say anything else. The first,
that Rob wrote.
Yes, the first African American Baha'i in the United States was Robert Turner, and you can see a picture of him there on the right. He was born in 1855 in Virginia, probably into slavery. He became a butler to Phoebe Hearst, and that, of course, was the opportunity for him to, eventually go on pilgrimage, because when Phoebe Hearst went on pilgrimage in 1898, she brought Robert along. So Robert met Abdu'l-Bahá. He was the first African American to go on pilgrimage. Abdu'l-Bahá showered special affection on him, and of course he remained a loyal Baha'i all his life and saw the growth of African American Baha'i community later on in the up to the teens when he passed away. Harry Randall, who is, what number is Harry?
9.
Let's see, number 9. So he is right there next to Robert Turner, a little bit to the left and down from Robert Turner. Harry became a Baha'i really as a result of Abdu'l-Bahā's visit. He was born in 1863. became an active businessman in Boston, a wealthy businessman, in fact, in Boston. He became quite interested in spiritual matters, sort of dabbled in them, you might say, and actually, I think he may have had a Swami stay at his house for a while, if I remember right, and was very interested in Vedantism. That would have been probably closer to the year 1900. He then heard about Abdu'l-Bahá through some of his Baha'i friends, and the famous incident you probably all have heard of is he hears Abdu'l-Bahá speak when Abdu'l-Bahá comes to Boston in May of 1912, and he is asked whether he can go buy some grape juice because Abdu'l-Bahá needs some grape juice. So he goes across, finds some grape juice, and brings it to the hotel, and he's told, go upstairs and give it to Abdu'l-Bahá. So he goes up to Abdu'l-Bahā's room, and Abdu'l-Bahá is busily praying. So he puts it down and has to wait, and has to wait a very, very long time. And instead of getting all anxious and nervous and irritated that he has to wait, he decides that this is his opportunity to learn something about prayer. And so this was his first sort of spiritual lesson with Abdu'l-Bahá. Later, he has Abdu'l-Bahá, when Abdu'l-Bahá comes back to Boston in August, to visit his house and meet his wife, who was dying of tuberculosis. And Abdu'l-Bahá told him to keep her in the sun and buy her chocolate, and that she would recover. And indeed, she did recover. And while Harry himself passed away in 1929, she lived to ripe old age and pioneered to South Africa in the 1950s. So she did quite well, really. So those are a few stories about them. The Canadian was, I think, probably Mr. Hoare, is probably
Yes.
the one that we're talking about. He was born in Nova Scotia.
That's right.
But he was an American Baha'i. So someone asked about that.
Thank you so much, Rob. I encourage you to develop a whole talk on this, or book on this subject. It's quite fascinating. Thank you. So we don't know exactly how Sarah first heard of the faith. She knew Phoebe Hearst in the 1890s, but they became Baha'is independent of each other. But regarding the initial meeting between Sarah and Abdu'l-Bahá, here are some details from Earl Redman's book, Visiting Abdu'l-Bahá in Haifa and Akka, 1897 to 1921.
In January 1900, Mariah P. Wilson from the Boston area and Sarah Farmer from Green Acre boarded the SS Durst Bismarck for the Mediterranean Sea and Egypt. Once on their way, Sarah discovered two friends, Josephine Locke and Elizabeth Knudsen, also on the ship. Sarah soon noticed that her two friends were reading a book on deck, which they would quickly conceal whenever Sarah approached them. Sarah's curiosity finally led her friends to reveal that they were reading the hidden words by Baha'u'llah. After reading what was in the little book, Sarah immediately wanted to visit Abdu'l-Bahá. She and Mariah cabled for permission to visit, and it was granted. When the four women reached Egypt, they met some of the Baha'is living there, which allowed them to learn more about the faith. They arrived in Haifa on 22 March, and the next day took a carriage to Akka. They were not impressed with the ancient town as they passed through stench and confusion of the narrow street. Then they entered the courtyard of the master's house and saw him at the top of the steps and immediately forgot everything else. That night, Sarah wrote in her diary, "Heart too full for speech, received by our Lord." Sarah Farmer had many questions that she hoped Abdu'l-Bahá would answer. To ensure that she didn't forget any of them, she wrote down 15 questions on paper and placed the sheet in her Bible. When Abdu'l-Bahá called for her at 5 the next morning, she dashed off for her interview without her Bible and therefore without the questions. When she was seated before him, the master turned to the interpreter and said, "Tell Miss Farmer that this is the answer to her first question." Abdu'l-Bahá then proceeded to answer each question in order until, unable to restrain her emotions, Miss Farmer burst into tears of happiness. Though exhilarated, she returned to her room, to regain her composure before she could listen to the answers to the rest of her questions.
So along with confirming her vision for Green Acre at their meeting, Abdu'l-Bahá began a correspondence with Sarah that was a lifeline for her. 28 tablets to her are published in Tablets of Abdu'l-Bahá. One of the things he wrote to her was this.
O maid servant of God, know verily I was with you in spirit during your assemblage in the meeting, under the standard of peace. And I perceived ye with my spirit on the mount of salvation, and shared with ye in celebrating the praise of my Lord.
It was extraordinary, the spiritual bond they shared and how he could commune with her from such a physical distance. He also wrote,
Thy heart is connected with the callings of the kingdom of El-Lapa, so that thou hast dispensed with the wires of the world, because the terminal of the spiritual wire reached the center of thy heart, and the other is placed in the spiritual center, vibrating information, constantly thought the power of the spirit, and successively conveying the great glad tidings.
perhaps if we had the purity of heart to understand and engage in this communication and dispense with devices, wireless or otherwise, it would be more effective than email or texting. Sarah also corresponded with others by letter in the Holy Land and elsewhere. Dr. Yunus Afrokte, in Memories of 9 Years in Akka, writes,
One such correspondent, who seemed to live in a trance-like state of dreams and spiritual discovery, was none other than Amatullah Miss Sarah Farmer, the founder of Green Acre Baha'i School. Many of her visions and prognostications came true. Her approach to the discovery and understanding of truth, her method of reasoning, and her logical arguments not only closely resembled those of the early Babis, but also served to elucidate their many mystical and obscure concepts.
one of Abdu'l-Bahā's tablets to Sarah Farmer was particularly significant in light of social justice work and conversations we're having today. In a conversation with a man from South Africa in London in 1911, Abdu'l-Bahá said,
Baha'u'llah once compared the colored people to the black pupil of the eye, surrounded by the white. In this black pupil is seen the reflection of that which is before it, and through it, the light of the Spirit shineth forth.
so there's various contexts in which Abdu'l-Bahá used this metaphor, such as conversations and correspondence with early believers, including Robert Turner, the first African-American believer. In a letter sent through Phoebe Hearst to Robert Turner, date unknown, Abdu'l-Bahá wrote,
O thou who art pure in heart, sanctified in spirit, peerless in character, beauteous in face. Thy photograph hath been received, revealing thy physical frame in the utmost grace and the best appearance. Thou art dark in countenance and bright in character. Thou art like unto the pupil of the eye, which is dark in color, yet it is the fount of light and the revealer of the contingent world. I have not forgotten, nor will I forget thee. I beseech God that he may graciously make thee the sign of his bounty amidst mankind. Illumine thy face with the light of such blessings as are vouchsafed by the merciful Lord. Single thee out for his love in this age, which is distinguished among all the past ages and centuries.
and in Robert Turner's eulogy, sent in a letter to Ali Kulik Khan in 1909, he writes,
O thou creator, O thou forgiver, glorify the precious Robert in thy kingdom. Bring him into intimate association with the birds of the celestial meadow. O thou knowing God, although that sinless one was black in color, like unto the black pupil of the eye, he was a source of shining light.
But here's an interesting aspect of these references. It was to Sarah Farmer in 1902 that Abdu'l-Bahá wrote the first known reference to the pupil of the eye.
As to Robert Turner, Alice Ashton, and Louisa Washington, verily the faces of these are as the pupil of the eye. Although the pupil is created black, yet it is the source of light. I hope God will make these black ones the glory of the white ones, and as the depositing of the lights of love of God. And I ask God to assist them in all circumstances, that they may be encompassed with the favors of their loving Lord throughout centuries and ages.
So originally the names were not published, but going back to the original tablets, the first names were given. We know that Robert referred to Robert Turner, Alice probably to Alice Ashton, who worked at Green Acre and whose family became Baha'is eventually, and Louise to Louise Washington of New York. When we remember how Sarah's parents took in runaway slaves on the Underground Railroad, how Sarah had grown up knowing abolitionists and reformers, and that Sarah herself had a vision in 1892 of Green Acre as
a great center of learning, with throngs of people coming to it by boat, carriage, even walking. On the shore was a large tent with people comfortably seated, listening to a series of conferences on progressive subjects, free of charge so that all could come. There were all races and creeds there, and happy children and young people ready to learn how to make their lives of value. Peace was the aim of everyone's efforts. And I saw also that in the years ahead, the conferences would grow into a school, and the school into a university.
So when we contemplate the evidence of her commitment to racial unity, we can see how Abdu'l-Bahá had found a receptive hearer of his message, how very important and precious is this unity and the vision they both held of the future of Green Acre and of the world. Interestingly, too, the second message he sent with the same metaphor came to another white woman, Alma Knobloch, whom he praised for her work with African Americans. After that, aside from the message about Robert Turner he sent to Ali Kuli Khan, he addressed people of color, Pocahontas Pope, the first African-American believer in Washington, D.C., and I think the first African-American woman, Louise Washington, an early believer in New York, and George Anderson, also of Washington, D.C. In a conversation with Louis Gregory when he visited the master in Egypt, Abdu'l-Bahá said,
I liken you to the pupil of the eye. You are black, and it is black in color, yet it becomes the focus of light.
And as we know, Louis Gregory spent his latter years at Green Acre with his wife, Louisa. When Abdu'l-Bahá actually arrived, let me go back. Abdu'l-Bahá was appalled at the racial prejudice in America. Blackness and whiteness, he said, do not matter. True judgment is in the heart and soul. So we can be proud that Sarah understood this message and worked for racial unity in her day and received the first message with the pupil of the eye analogy. So when Abdu'l-Bahá actually arrived in America, Sarah wrote to Ali Kuli Khan, with whom Abdu'l-Bahá was staying in Washington, D.C.
I think daily of you, all now that I know that our Lord is in your midst. He is so gentle and loving that we have been able to see him and to love him. What can I do for him? For 12 years, I've looked forward towards welcoming him to Green Acre, and I have not been able to been there since 1909. I am now in the doctor's hands, but our Lord encourages me that I am to be well. The longing to see him is beyond all description. Will you kindly tell me about his strength? Can he walk about the lanes? How can we minister best to him? Good night and blessings to you all, especially to our master. Much love and tenderness. How glad I am that I went to Akka. Every day, the love increases.
So now here are some precious images of Sarah with Abdu'l-Bahá at Green Acre and the kiss he gave her on the cheek. And I think it's the only photo of him kissing anyone that we know of. And here's a letter to a friend from Sarah after his visit.
Dearest Cecilia, our glorious master arrived at Green Acre the very day you wrote. Words cannot tell you what it was to me to look upon that beloved face once more. Everyone loved him. He came from Dublin, New Hampshire in an automobile, and Dr. Cowles was kind enough to take me in one to meet him. How beautiful it was. He gave us a whole blessed week and called on me twice, once to say goodbye. Oh, my Zia, life is different with his love. I greet you both, Rahebe.
Abdu'l-Bahá often gave the early believers Persian names. Rahebe was the name Abdu'l-Bahá gave to Sarah. I'm not sure how and when this name was given to her, but I believe it is what is engraved on a silver cup in the Eliot archives. And I've run across several instances in which Sarah signed her name Rahebe. It means nun, or perhaps something like consecrated one. So Dia, or maybe Zia, may have been the name he gave to Cecilia, meaning light. In the Green Acre book, there are some details about Abdu'l-Bahá's time at Green Acre and how he went with her to Portsmouth, to the Naval Shipyard, and to Montsalvat or Sunset Hill. Ivy Drew Edwards recalls,
Julia Culver, Miss Klebs, Sarah Farmer, and I went on a carriage ride with the master. He said it was important that Sarah Farmer visualized the great university her efforts had made possible. He drove us all over Sunset Hill, twice pointing out certain trees to Sarah Farmer. When we were almost at the top of the hill, Abdu'l-Bahá took Miss Farmer's hands in his and said very loudly, "This is hallowed ground, made so by your vision and sacrifice. Always remember, this is hallowed ground which I am pointing out to you." At the top of the hill, Abdu'l-Bahá stopped the carriage and directed Sarah Farmer to take his hand. He led her around the area for about 5 minutes, talking to her all the time and frequently pointing his finger in one direction or another. Each time, Miss Farmer would smile and shake her head. When they came back to the carriage, Abdu'l-Bahá said to all of us, "This is where the first Baha'i university will be built." Then he said, pointing to a spot in the center of the area, "This is where the second Baha'i temple in the United States will be raised." In reality, all this has been built and is right now ready to become a material reality whenever the Supreme Concourse finds mankind purified enough to bring about its consummation. Then he turned to Miss Farmer and said, "You will be revered above all American women one fine day. You will see." Then he said to all of us, "You may all be able to see this university with your own eyes if your prayers to do so are sincere. This will be the finest university on the planet and will draw students to it from all countries of the world. People will stream up and down the hill to some department in the university and to the temple for prayers, which shall be in the midst of it."
Alfred E. Ludd recalled,
We can never forget the master's prophetic saying, when he stood on Mount Savat and definitely pointed to the spot where the second Mashriq al-Azhar in America would be built, and beside it, the great institution of learning. These projects, he said, were ordained matters.
Harry Randall also described this experience in a letter.
He went to the top of Mount Salvat, and he told us that on this spot, a great Mashriq al-Azhar would be built, and that the whole hill would be covered with institutions of learning, science, and religion. And he said already it had been created and was not a prophecy alone. And the Mashriq al-Azhar hung low over that place.
He also told Sarah these were ordained matters.
But a little patience is needed.
So here are a few more tributes to Sarah, but first a short explanation. Bittersweet, the beautiful farmer family home in Elliott burned down in 1904 while Sarah was away, and all of Sarah's papers and her father's invention papers, designs, and models were tragically destroyed. During that time, Abdu'l-Bahá wrote letters to her of hope and inspiration. He told her that opposition will wax fierce and people will arise to oppression, but she should not be discouraged or grieved. He promised her that opposition will pass away and that at that time your value shall appear among the nations of the world, and tribes and people will arise to praise you. I think this was hard to imagine for Sarah. Mrs. E. Chester Spinney remembered.
After a bittersweet burned, Miss Farmer and her aunt Sally Coffin went to live at the home of Mrs. Spinney's father and mother, Jasper and Harriet Shapley. The second summer after bittersweet burned, Miss Farmer spent the summer in the small cottage back of Mrs. Chester Spinney's. She lived alone and loved it very much, and she named it the Sheltering Arms. Just as the light began to come, Miss Farmer would get up and go into the pines all alone. She loved birds and knew them all, and all of their calls. She would return to the little cottage at 6:30 or 6:45 and have her rest then. Whenever Miss Farmer went away, she would always bring home different specimens of nature. There would never have been a Green Acre if it had not been for Miss Farmer. Miss Farmer was outstanding because she seemed to have all good qualities. Most of us have a few, but she seemed to have all.
Louise Bosch from Geyserville, California wrote,
Miss Farmer's disposition was one of the utmost interest in the people of this world. It was peculiar to her to remember not only the name and initials of every person she would be made acquainted with, but his address, if it were once told her. She adored all foreigners alike. She made countless friends. The spirit of the age was powerful in her. Her memory was phenomenal. She talked slowly and also wrote slowly with long, pale characters. She saved every scrap of paper, like Thornton Chase did, on which anybody ever wrote her. She had cases and cases full. Alas, that it was all burned up in the great fire of her beautiful and famed bittersweet residence. That was the breaking of her. She was unattached to material things and lived a life of mind only, and it was a delicate mind, not given to suffer and endure vicissitudes. She was greatly compassionate on the one hand, yet touching only the high spots of her life on the other. She was called Mother Heart by many of her friends. Miss Farmer would leave Green Acre soon after the annual assembly of the Green Acre Conference was over and would not be likely to return until near reopening time. She traveled around to meet the people whom she could put on her next program. Wherever she stayed, the doorbell would ring all day, which made it difficult to entertain her as a staying guest. It was in 1901 that she came from across the states at that time. She had sent by mail or express from what I think was California to Green Acre, a beautiful yet very fresh looking magnolia flower, a very big one, and which arrived in bittersweet, as said, so live and fresh. The stem of it was stuck in a hole made into a large watery raw potato, rendering its moisture to the flower. I shall always remember that careful packing. She was a glorious soul. She ruined her health by perpetual overwork and getting no sleep, only always a few hours at a time. She had a big mail all the year round and was always writing. Even on her bed, which was a large one, were strewn so many letters and pieces of literature, too important to be mislaid. So she didn't allow her bed to be made at all when she was home.
At Sarah's funeral, Kate Ives said,
Miss Farmer's mission in life was to make others happy. It was her great universal love that made her so dear to others. Everybody that knew Miss Farmer loved her. I remember that Abdu'l-Bahá said that Miss Farmer's love would put new life into stone.
And Alfred Luntz said,
Miss Farmer was a noble woman, known all over the world. In far Asia, Sarah Farmer's name is spoken with the utmost reverence. Her influence and memory will always dwell in our hearts.
many had written in her autograph books. Here are a few from 1907. Stephen Weiss, an American Reform rabbi and progressive leader from New York, wrote,
Green Acre School seems to me a fulfillment, one of the myriad fulfillments yet to be, of the prophecy of the Isaiah of the exile. For my house shall be called a house of prayer unto all peoples. To Miss Sarah Farmer, founder of Green Acre, with the affection of Stephen S. Wise, July 13th, 1907.
May the spirit of Green Acre with its peaceful strength ever nourish the souls of men, and may the life of its leader ever serve as an inspiration for noble, generous, wholehearted service.
To the immortal Sarah J. Farmer, Saint Sarah of the future, founder of Green Acre. Horace Fletcher, flushed with happiness of the harmony of Green Acre, this 24th day of July, 1907.
I think these accounts all show us much about our heroine. On her birthday in various years, poets have been known to write poetic tributes. Here's John Greenleaf Whittier's in 1890 on her 43rd birthday.
What shall we bring to her? What shall we sing to her? Of our love a token? What of her worth save written or spoken? Perchance while these latter days light up Piscataqua's sunsets of glory, some bard of Green Acre, more worthy, may make her the theme of his story. God's angel, we rank her, thank her for all she has given. The years of right living, of blessing and giving, are counted in heaven. Of rough life the smoother, of sorrow the soother, of trouble the calmer, for blinded eyes seeing, God bless her for being just Sarah J. Farmer.
And here's a poem honoring Sarah at a dinner on her 50th birthday in 1897, probably by Charles Malloy.
We've a queen, and no one can mistake her. We shall not see her like again. She was born one day, and Green Acre already was in her brain. Green Acre is more than Green Acre, fair as may be the scene. And the charmer is still Miss Farmer, and the best of the scene is the queen.
And here's one definitely by Charles Malloy on her 57th birthday in 1905.
We cannot say she's nearer heaven now that she's come to 57. I think indeed we'd better say she's been near heaven all the way. For heaven is not a distant star. Heaven is heaven in what we are. And heaven is heaven in what we make it. That's why 'tis so easy to mistake it. In making heaven, we live alone, and everyone must make his own. If you would become a heaven maker, the place to begin is at Green Acre.
Risa Gibbs, an artist from Toronto, recently heard about Sarah Farmer for the first time and created a new painting. No doubt there will be many more works inspired by Sarah's life and vision. So now I'd like to share with you two stories from my own experience. Research can be a time-consuming, unpredictable, and sometimes miraculous process. And for 13 years, I searched for proof of whether and how Sarah had actually witnessed the signing of the Portsmouth Peace Treaty. Historians, I knew, were skeptical, as only men were in the room. And though we had found a few references in articles and diaries, it was not clear just how Sarah might have witnessed the signing. So I was in the final stages of publishing this book right here, and without this information. And Rick Becker of South Berwick, a friend of Aletta or Terry Weiss, who was not a Baha'i, Rick wasn't, posted on Facebook an article from 1905 from an old scrapbook of Dr. Willis, one of Sarah's business partners, which Rick had bought at a garage sale for $50. While he generally posted things about South Berwick's past, one day he decided that someone might just be interested in someone from Elliott. So that day, Aletta forwarded the post to me, and right before we went to press, I added the information that proved how Sarah had seen the signing. So I was able to publish it in here. It was so exciting to get that. It was like a miracle to me. And Sarah is quoted extensively in the article. So it was astonishing. And of course, when I met Rick, when I came up to Green Acre, I knelt before him, and his wife said to me, she had never done that, but I did. The other story occurred when I went to Arlington, Texas, to the Baha'i Center to perform a monologue from the point of Sarah. And unlike Sarah herself, I'm not particularly a morning person. So as I was driving over there and wondering how I could pull off this portrayal, I begged her to be with me. So I did the piece alone on the stage, and afterwards I was approached by a young woman who was not a Baha'i, but had simply wandered in for the first time into the center that day. She asked me, "Who was the other woman that came in with you wearing the long white dress?" So, will Sarah become the envy of the queens of all regions and the rival of celebrated people of the world? Will she be revered above all American women one day? No doubt the future will yield the answers to such questions. Thank you.
Goodness. Anne and all of our wonderful readers, thank you so much. I'm so glad I was on mute, because about every other slide I was like, wow. I was crying, I was laughing, I was exclaiming. Thank you all for this. Next, we will have a 10-minute film that was made by Anne and Tim Perry last year for the Sarah Farmer Peace Word program, and it will contain more details that we haven't yet heard this evening.
On the banks of the Piscataqua River in Elliott, Maine, stands an historic edifice. Built as a resort hotel in 1899, the Green Acre Inn became the site for international conferences focused on peace, racial unity, gender equality, and other progressive ideals. Who was its founder? What did she believe? Why is she associated with peace? And why was the inn eventually named after her? Sarah Farmer was the daughter of transcendentalists sympathetic to people living in bondage and experiencing oppression. Their home in Dover, New Hampshire became a way station on the Underground Railroad. Friends included reformers such as Sojourner Truth and Harriet Beecher Stowe, both of whom came to their home to visit, as well as Harriet Tubman, Julia Ward Howe, and other progressive leaders. Moses Farmer was an inventor who pioneered in the telegraph field and created the fire alarm system. He also constructed the technology for an electromagnetic locomotive. Hannah Farmer was a philanthropist who helped save the Old North Church in Boston from being torn down. During the Civil War, she sent supplies to Southern hospitals. In Eliot, she created Rosemary Cottage, a summer retreat for poor mothers and their children from Boston. When Sarah was 1, they moved to Salem, Massachusetts, where Moses was appointed operator in the Salem Telegraph Office. When Sarah was 12, Moses lit up their parlor with a row of incandescent lights, the first time electricity had been used to provide lighting. Thomas Edison was only 12 then. Sarah spent her teen years in Salem. She was smart and well-liked, and at graduation served as the valedictorian of her high school. In 1872, when Sarah was 25, her family moved from Salem to Newport, Rhode Island, where Moses served as a professor of electrical science and a consultant to the U.S. Navy. But Moses became seriously ill, and Sarah's health was poor. They decided to move to Eliot, Maine, Hannah's family home, to enjoy the benefits of country living. Sarah found herself caring for both parents and had what was then called a nervous collapse, then benefited by the popular cure of an extended trip to Europe. On the ship, Sarah had an image of herself as vain and selfish. She vowed to devote the rest of her life to service. At home, Sarah revived the Eliot Library Association and organized evenings of discussions on literature. She spoke in churches and other venues to raise library funds. The poet John Greenleaf Whittier was a family friend, and she persuaded him to donate an entire collection of books. Today, over the mantel in a room of Eliot's William Fogg Library, hangs a beautiful portrait of Sarah and her dog Barry. In 1889, 4 men formed the Eliot Hotel Company to build a resort hotel in Eliot. On March 1, 1890, Sarah signed an agreement to become the 5th partner of the venture. In 1891, Hannah died. To distract her mind from her troubles, Sarah attended lectures in Boston. One day in June 1892, she had a vision of Green Acre as a place where various philosophies and religions could find expression. In March 1893, Moses and Sarah went to Chicago to exhibit some of his inventions at the World's Columbian Exposition, also known as the Chicago World's Fair. Moses exhibited his light bulb and electric car at the fair, but became ill with pneumonia and died there. Sarah, deep in grief, returned to Eliot. A few months later, a Parliament of the World's Religions was held in Chicago as part of the Columbian Exposition. Sarah returned to Chicago just after the closing of the Parliament. She met with its organizer and invited Vivekananda, a Hindu from Calcutta, and Dharamapala, a Buddhist from Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, to speak at Green Acre. That following summer, in 1894, Sarah dedicated Green Acre to the ideals of peace and religious unity. Then she had the first known peace flag in the world raised and explained, "In looking for an emblem, we wanted something that would be a call to everybody and fit everybody, and we felt that the message that had been brought to the world by prophet after prophet was the message of peace. So we've put on a large banner over our heads, peace." The peace flag was 36 feet long with green letters on a white background. It hung on an 85-foot pole created from 2 ships' masts tied together. During the next decade, Green Acre and Sarah became known in many circles. Educators and social reformers came to exchange views. By 1897, Green Acre was much publicized in the United States and known around the world. Discussion topics were quite advanced. Evolution was a hot topic, and participants at Green Acre often took a progressive look at the debate over it. Race, too, was a subject that provoked divisions, yet Sarah supported social advancement with a Work in Education project where African American families from the South spent time in Maine. People of color were invited to lecture, the most prominent of whom were George Washington Carver and W.B. Du Bois. In 1903, an article in the Boston Sunday Journal reported, "Years ago, intellectual Boston would have gone out to Concord for spiritual regeneration. Today, the inner circle of intellectual Boston goes to Green Acre." Despite favorable activities and development, there were difficulties. Many wondered if she should be in charge of the programs and operations. Financial difficulties prevailed. Distraught, Sarah left for a cruise with her friend Mariah Wilson. On January 3, 1900, they boarded a ship bound for the Mediterranean, joining 2 old friends who were going to Akka, Palestine, now Israel, to visit Abdu'l-Bahá, the son of the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. There, Abdu'l-Bahá confirmed her vision for Green Acre, and she felt she had found a path representing universal truths. In 1904, a war raged between Russia and Japan, but peace continued to be promoted at Green Acre. The following year, Portsmouth, New Hampshire was chosen as a site of negotiations for a treaty to end the war. President Theodore Roosevelt invited delegates from Russia and Japan to consult at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, only a few miles from Green Acre. The delegates could see Sarah's peace flag flying from where they met. Finally, the news that a peace treaty was to be signed was announced. Sarah invited the peace delegates and President Roosevelt to Green Acre for a special victory celebration. Roosevelt sent a letter of regret, and the Russian diplomat Vita also declined on behalf of his entourage, but the Japanese peace envoys came. On September 5, 1905, the day of the signing of the treaty, Sarah went to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. Because she was well known and respected, she was given a pass into the shipyard. All of the invited guests were men who held important positions. Sarah asked to witness the signing of the treaty. She was not allowed to do so, but an Elliott man by the name of Alfonso Staples saw her and invited her up to his office in the adjacent building, where he pushed a table up to the window and had her stand on it and look across to the room where the envoys were to sign the peace treaty. In a newspaper account in 1905, Sarah is quoted, "The candle across the way threw out its cheering message, and with a feeling at my heart deeper than any words can convey, I said softly to myself, 'How far that little candle throws its beams,' and I breathed a prayer that this time might be the last, that a peace treaty would need to be made to end a war between men who should be brothers." In 1912, Abdu'l-Bahá came to Green Acre for a week as part of an 8-month journey across America. He and Sarah visited the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, and again he confirmed her vision of her beloved Green Acre. Green Acre has evolved over the years and exists today as a beacon of hope and progress for many. Abdu'l-Bahá predicted that Sarah Farmer would in the future be seen as the envy of the queens of all regions and the rival of all the celebrated people of the world. And perhaps, as both of them envisioned, the world will establish a lasting and sustainable peace. Dear friends, I greet you with a heart full on this anniversary of my birth. What a wonderful gathering. You've made me so happy. I see that you're carrying on my work splendidly. I was first awakened to the need for peace and equality when our home was one of the last stops on the Underground Railroad, where slaves could escape their bondage. And why were they bound? Simply because of a misconception that color of skin should be a division among the children of God. My own dear mother joined the Abolitionist Society, and I was blessed by a child by meeting Sojourner Truth and other reformers in Salem. To hear Sojourner speak was truly memorable. She was illiterate, but spoke out fearlessly. I can still hear her voice. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now these asking to do it, the men better let them. I was raised to be a free thinker, committed to peace and justice. My father, an inventor who did not believe in patents for his inventions, lit up our home with electric lights on this day in 1859, when Thomas Edison was only my age, 12. My mother taught me to be a reformist and a humanitarian. After joining 4 men to run the Elliott Hotel, I had a vision that it should be a place where all could come to learn about different perspectives. And, well, you know the history. Of course, when many well-known people came to visit and give lectures, including colorful swamis from the East, this made the town of Elliott a bit nervous, as you can imagine. But they've adapted. So many people have been drawn to Green Acre. I remember one Jewish woman, Esther Davis, from Atlantic City. She had been disappointed in love, and a psychologist told her, "You should go to Green Acre." She spent the summer here. One time she attended the meeting of the Sunset Group, a group of us who loved sitting out on the porch of Miss Mansfeld, watching the sunset over the Piscataqua. We sat silently watching the glowing ball of fire disappearing over the water. Then each one of us gave a short spiritual message that she had been given through the Spirit. Esther later said she was silent because she felt stupid and empty. Nothing had come to her, and it was her time to say something. Then suddenly, the place seemed filled with a great light, and she saw an immense pair of wings over the place. A hand seemed to push her forward to arise and come forward to me and say, "Miss Farmer, I see an immense pair of wings over this place. They are especially over you, as if to protect you." At that time, she knew nothing of the difficulties I was laboring under. I was trying to do more than my strength allowed, and there were financial problems and ill health. There were those who had felt I had betrayed Green Acre because of my interest in the Persian Revelation. I was much troubled, and I felt I had enemies all around me trying to take over my programs. And the inn wasn't making enough money because I kept inviting people who couldn't pay anything. But I told her, "Oh, my child, you are seeing the wings of the cherubim. It is my symbol. Put your hands upon me and give me the blessing, for you know not how much I need it." Yes, I've been sorely tested by some who claim to have loved Green Acre. Not you, of course, but some people thought I was insane and wanted to have me put away in a sanatorium. Some were jealous about what we have at Green Acre and wanted to see it fail. Some believed I should never have gone to the Holy Land, where I became convinced of the Baha'i revelation and how it relates to the oneness of all people and all religions. They accuse me of betraying liberality and turning to sectarianism. But they cannot see my point of view. My joy in the Persian Revelation is not that it reveals one of the streams flowing to that great ocean of life, light, and love, but that it is a perfect mirror of that ocean. What in Green Acre was a vision and a hope becomes through it a blessed reality. It has illumined every other expression of truth hitherto known and placed my feet on a rock from which they cannot be moved. By means of its light, as shown in the life of the Master, Abdu'l-Bahá, I have entered into a joy greater than any I have hitherto known. But for this, I have suffered terribly. But then I receive guidance just when things seem most bleak. Abdu'l-Bahá has written me 28 letters, consoling me at my darkest times. His letters always arrive when I most needed them. O maidservant of God, be not disheartened if thou hearest the murmuring of the deniers, the clamor of the hypocrites. Withstand their opposition with cheerfulness and exaltation. Be thou a light to every darkness, a dispeller of every sadness, a healer for every sick person, a quencher for every thirst, a shelter for every refugee, a refuge for every captive. Trust in the grace of thy Lord. He shall surely assist thee with a confirmation, whereat minds will be amazed, and the thoughts of the men of learning will be astonished. Men of learning be astonished by me? Here's his letter from last year after Bittersweet was burned down. My dear family home, what a terrible test it was to lose everything, even Father's invention papers. O bird without a nest, there is a hidden wisdom in the burning of the house, which before long will be clearly known. Divine attractions and heavenly bounties alone cause happiness to the hearts. Some of the weak souls thought that this dear maidservant of God was attached to the house and to the perishable world. Now the house is burnt. All will realize that thy attraction is increasing. Thy steps are drawing near. Thy flag is raised higher, and thy condition more excellent. Show forth such happiness and joy that all will be astonished. I try, Lord, I try. Be with me, Abdu'l-Bahá. Know verily I was with you in spirit during your assemblage in the meeting under the standard of peace. My peace flag. It's proved easier to raise the banner than to fully realize the message. Here's a precious passage. As to the people of color, verily the faces of these are as the pupil of the eye. Although the pupil is created black, yet it is the source of light. I hope these black ones will be the glory of the white ones. You see, I've been right to proclaim the unity of race, despite the resistance and opposition from so many. In the future, I visualize all people mingling together, regardless of their station in life, their race, their religion, or gender. That will create the necessary conditions for world peace. Now listen to what Abdu'l-Bahá says about women. O maidservant of God, know that every true woman who is attracted to the fragrance of holiness in this most glorious age will surpass even the most developed men of previous centuries. I hope that thou wilt become the lamp of the Society of Green Acre, and wilt become the envy of the queens of all regions, and wilt be the rival of all the celebrated people of the world. The envy of queens, the rival of celebrated people, I cannot imagine that. But he also says, when the equality of men and women is realized, The foundation of war will be utterly destroyed. Assuredly, woman will abolish warfare among mankind. Dear friends, Green Acre was established to lay aside the spirit of criticism and live in unity and help others to connect with the source of all strength and beauty. We seek to eliminate the very foundations of war. And so I'm supremely happy that progress has been made and the future is bright with promise. Green Acre is indeed a spot where the peace that passeth understanding may be realized. And soon I hope this will ripple out to the whole world. God willing, you will be instrumental in this blessed task. I thank you for inviting me to join the celebration tonight, and I leave you with the image and hopes of the Master, Abdu'l-Bahá, who is always with us, and a single word, peace.
Raise the flag, Sarah. Raise the flag for peace. Raise the flag, Sarah Farmer. Raise the flag for peace. That all war will cease. That all war will cease. She was a woman of vision, with a dream in her heart. She was a woman with a mission, as the world was falling apart. She made a place of peace where all could come to learn that we all are one. She prayed for the end of the Russian-Japanese war. So many people died in 1904. The banner she chose to unfurl was the first flag of peace in the world. Raise the flag, Sarah. Raise the flag for peace. Raise the flag, Sarah Farmer. Raise the flag for peace. That all war will cease. That all war will cease. She held a celebration in Elliott, Maine, for the peace delegation. So many people came. They sang and they talked about peace, so the war in the future would cease. The war finally ended in 19 the flag, Sarah.
Thank you to Salt River Trio for that wonderful song. It's kind of catchy, it grows on you, doesn't it? So we would like to wrap up tonight's formal program with a prayer that was revealed for Sarah Farmer by Abdu'l-Bahá when he arrived at Green Acre on August 16, 1912.
O thou kind God, encircle these servants with the glances of thy providence. Set aglow the hearts of this assemblage with the fire of thy love. Illumine these faces with the light of heaven. Enlighten the hearts with the light of the most great guidance. O God, the clouds of superstitions have covered the horizons of the hearts. O Lord, dispel these clouds so that the lights of the sun of reality may shine. O Lord, illumine our eyes so that we may behold thy light. O Lord, attune our ears so that we may hear the call of the supreme concourse. O Lord, render our tongues eloquent so that we may become engaged in thy commemoration. O Lord, sanctify and purify the hearts so that the effulgence of thy love may shine therein. O thou kind Lord, bestow quick recovery through thy power and bounty upon the founder of this association. O Lord, this woman has served thee, has turned her face toward thy kingdom, and has established these conferences in order that reality may be investigated and the light of reality shine. O Lord, be thou ever her support. O Lord, be thou ever her comforter. O Lord, bestow upon her quick healing. Verily thou art the clement. Verily thou art the merciful. Verily thou art the generous.
And all of the other friends who gave their time and energy tonight to honor one of the disciples of Abdu'l-Bahá, Sarah Jane Farmer. Now we will transition into our Q&A time. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box. These are questions for Anne. I believe Rob had to leave. I mean, you can ask any of the panelists questions if you want to. So Anne, someone is wondering, in what book are these pupil of the eye references to Sarah Farmer published?
In that book by Christopher Buck, and I had the title up on the PowerPoint. Maybe Tim could find that because I don't have the title right here, but I found it online and I read a paper that he had written too. He's done a lot of work on that subject. And the whole tablet that was sent to Sarah, of course, is a much longer tablet. And today Jessica was asking if it mentions Green Acre, and I'll have to refer to that. I just had that part, you know, excerpted today, but to be continued, the discussion on that. And I just want to thank Jessica so much for helping with this program, and for Tim, who did so much technical work to get the PowerPoints together and all that. Thank you, both of you. And my readers, who are all specially selected for their very special qualities and their love for the faith and Abdu'l-Bahá and for Green Acre as well. Thank you.
And of course to you, Anne, none of this would have happened if it weren't for you. So thank you, Anne. Anne put this together, you guys. She's a force. So Anne, the same person, Stephen, he's wondering, I think he's living in North Carolina, and he's saying, you know, I'm wondering, this matters because if it was in 1902, it's possible, he's thinking that she was in North Carolina in the winter of 1902, 1903. So I'm inferring that perhaps if it was written in the winter, maybe it was written to her in North Carolina. I don't know if you know when in 1902 it was written.
Well, Stephen is amazing with all that he keeps track of. I don't have his kind of mind. I mean, he's constantly finding newspaper articles and putting all these details together. So I'm not sure where she was. That's something to research. So I hope you'll do that, Stephen. And, Jonathan Menon is writing a biography of Sarah Farmer, and he's been working on it about 12 or 13 years now. And it is going to be an exhaustive compendium. So he has gathered a lot of things that I don't have, I'm sure, and gone to various archives and libraries. And so there will be more coming forth about some of these details.
This is his last question. He's also wondering if the names of the Black participants and where they came from, the folks who came to Green Acre back in the day during Sarah Farmer's time, if we knew who they were and where they were coming from.
That's a really interesting question, and I wish we knew more about all of them, like Alice Ashton's family, for instance. More research needs to be done, and certainly, if we were to go to W.B. Du Bois' papers and maybe find references to his visits to Green Acre, that would be so fantastic. And other people of color that visited. I mean, we just have not found exhaustive records in the in the Green Acre archives and the National Archives. So we're hoping for more to come to light.
Someone is wondering, when did Sarah Farmer pass?
1916. And she died at her own home, but she had been away from her home since 1909 to 1916 in Portsmouth, well, first Massachusetts and then Portsmouth, in the sanatorium, because people wanted to put her away. It was more convenient to have her gone. And that was very sad. But she did come out of the sanatorium a few months before she died. And then she's buried right behind the Farmer home, which was rebuilt. A more modest home was built on the property. And a Baha'i lives there now. And there's a cemetery behind the house where she's buried with her parents and with Francis Keefe.
Oh, he's buried there too. I didn't know that. Okay. I think this is our last. Oh no. Oh, there's more. Is there a story about the sewing of the flag, the peace flag?
The sewing of the what?
The peace flag.
Oh, the peace flag, yes. Oh, who sewed it? I don't know, but it was on a flagpole 85 feet tall, and I think it was 45 feet long. It was a huge flag that was visible from the area and from where they were negotiating the peace treaty, from Portsmouth. And then Sarah also had 3 smaller flagpoles where she hoisted the flags of ships coming into the harbor. Like if a Norwegian ship was coming in that day, she must have studied the the schedule of ships coming in, and she would hoist the Norwegian flag to welcome them. And I just find this a wonderful part of, a little known part of Green Acre history. But I don't know more about who made the peace flag, where is the original, what happened to it. I wish we had more pictures of it,
I think there's a lot that is yet to be researched. I think there's a lot of info out there. And thanks to people like you, Anne, and Roseanne, and Rob, who are doing all of this work that benefits all of us. So thank you so much for all of your research.
Well, Roseanne is a treasure, and she had, she's the archivist with the Elliott Archives, and for years has been protecting so much information and photos and artifacts and things. So anyway, thank you, Roseanne. You've helped me a lot in the process of research and all that.
And I just want to give a shout out to Janine and Jim Sacco. Apparently they are here, and I believe they used to be the administrators at Green Acre. I've heard your names mentioned with love many times. So thank you for your service. We're so glad that you are here. And last question. Do we know what was the cause of her poor health?
Well, some of these accounts talked about how she didn't sleep very much and she was under strain for various reasons, the financial problems and the problems of jealousy, or, people, you just think she's a single woman trying to do this work. And there must have been a lot of impediments and frustrations. So, Abdu'l-Bahá said, some people said she was insane, but he said she doesn't have insanity, she has exaltation. So I think spiritually she was very much alive. But physically, she suffered a fall in 1907 in Boston. And after that, her health was not so great. And then I'm sure these years of incarceration basically did not help her and must have been very hard. But then there was that week when she came over to Green Acre with Abdu'l-Bahá, and it must have been such a blessing to have that experience with him. And coming up is the anniversary of his visit, which will be the next really exciting thing to celebrate there.
Absolutely. And you must be a mind reader, because that is actually what I was going to mention. I had it. Frank, can you pull up the link to the upcoming Conversations of the Heart and put it in the chat? Thank you. Dr. Ann Perry and Dr. Rob Stockman will be back again with us next month in August. I believe it's the 14th, in honoring Abdu'l-Bahā's visit to Green Acre in 1912. That was August. And what were the exact dates of his visit? Do you remember? The 12th or the 16th, maybe?
The objective of Abdu'l-Bahā's visit to Green Acre?
Not the time frame he was here. I believe it was August.
Oh, August 16th through 23rd.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So just a couple days before that, on August 14th, we'll have a program online, and Dr. Ann Perry and Dr. Robert Stockman will be helping us learn even more about Abdu'l-Bahā's visit here to Green Acre, and perhaps we'll learn a little bit more about Sarah Farmer at that time. I'm not sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll give a shorter talk and Rob will give a longer talk. That would be nice.
I believe that's all the questions that we have in our Q&A.
I'd just like to say something. Allison Grover is here, and I first met Allison when she was young and living at Green Acre with her parents serving there as the administrator. So I don't know if we could go around and each person say something about their connection to Green Acre or to Sarah. If we have time for that, would that be possible?
Sure, if we keep it short.
Very short. So I tell you what, I'll call on Allison just to say one sentence, and then she'll call on somebody else.
Perfect.
Allison.
Oh, thank you. Goodness, it's nerve-wracking to go first. Well, I began to go to Green Acre in 1965 after my mother became a Baha'i in Peterborough. She helped to form the first local spiritual assembly along with Polly Marlowe and George and Mary Godding and many others. And she began to teach children's classes so that she could take us. So I went to Green Acre every summer of my childhood until we moved to India to serve as pioneers in 1972. And on our return to the States in 1977, my father was hired to become the director of Green Acre. And so we lived, actually, Frank Robinson and his family and I share a very special bond because they now live in this home that is at the feet of Mount Salvat. And we lived there, my father served there until 1987. So, and I've come to Green Acre every year of my life, including the years that I lived there, except during these 2 years during the pandemic, which has been wrenching not to be back home. So I send those of you who are there my love. And I know my parents are here in spirit and would just have loved this program, and they just adore you so much.
Now you call on someone.
Okay, I'm going to call on Joni Lincoln.
Hi, everybody. I was first brought to Green Acre by Mimi and Sam McClellan when I was very young, and I was a very new Baha'i. I discovered the faith in California And when I came back to New England, I met Mimi and Sam, and they took me up to Green Acre. So that was a wonderful, wonderful time. I think the only other thing, I have many things I would like to say, but one particularly interesting thing is that we were out of the country for a long time, over 4 decades. And during the 2 decades, the 21 years we were in Africa, we could only afford to come back every so often. But when we did, we had our little kitties with us, and boy, getting them up to Green Acre was awfully important so that they could develop their own relationship with such a wonderful place. So I'll just say those 2 things. So it's lovely to be back and be living so close to Green Acre. I'm just 10 minutes away now. Yes, I will call on Larry McCullough.
So I first came to Green Acre probably right around the time that Joni first came, but I came the first year that Manny Reimer became director, came to visit the Reimer family because we had all been friends. We used to have the Chicago Milwaukee Baha'i Youth Club and all got together. I came out here, worked at Green Acre in years, and I now live in Elliott. So the house on my backdrop here is a house right at the foot of Mount Savat. I found out after I bought the house and turned it into a small retreat and workshop center, Roseanne actually gave me a letter from Sarah Farmer, a copy of a letter that Sarah Farmer had tried to buy this house after Bittersweet burned down, but they weren't able to come to an agreement. She wanted to use it to further the work of Mount Savat. We now have a nonprofit institute, Pine Tree Institute, that is trying to further some of that work. And I get to walk on the hill of Mount Savat on a regular basis. And I'm right cat a corner down the hill from Frank and from Allison's old house. So let's see, I'm going to call on Rhonda Palmer because I haven't seen you in so long and it's wonderful to see you.
So good to see you too. I have a very short story. My first visit to Green Acre was as Ann Perry's roadie when she in 2005 for the 100-year anniversary of the peace treaty signing. And so I traveled with Ann. What was the name of the thing we did right before that, where we traveled around and
Chautauqua.
The Chautauqua, where she was, she portrayed Sarah Farmer in talks around New Hampshire before this, and so I feel very close to the history there because I was in it every day. I'm gonna call on, is it Lida or Lida? Unmute yourself. Yep.
Sorry, Lida. Yes. Well, I heard about, I'm in Montreal, and I heard about Green Acre from a wonderful friend of ours here, Brownlee Thomas. And one of the reasons we went there for quite a few winter schools was for my kids to have the experience of being there and sort of feeling the atmosphere of being in a community, in a Baha'i community. And so we went there, especially when they were teenagers. And I think that has, actually my daughter is still friends with a guy that she met there, and they've kept in touch through, 10, 12 years. And so, I'm sure friendships like that have been built there over many years. And I will call Calvin.
Thank you. My history with Green Acre goes back a ways as well. I first became a Baha'i in Philadelphia, and everybody there said, now that you're a Baha'i, you have to go up to Elliott, Maine. So got in the car and drove however long it was from Philadelphia. It was just long, but it was such a wonderful time. I spent a week there, and that still is impressed in my mind about that wonderful week I spent there. Now I live in Portsmouth, so I'm right across the river from it, and it's such a blessing to be here. So See, who do we have left?
Frank, Tim, Heather, Al, Jessica.
Frank, yes.
Hello, Frank Robinson Jr. I serve as operations manager here at Green Acre. This September will be coming up on 3 years, but I grew up on the East Coast, so the Green Acre was always a school I went to. Elliott hasn't diversified much since the turn of the century, so it's interesting to be here, and I feel like I was particularly moved this evening by all the references of the people of the eye and how much Sarah's vision was centered on people of color and as well as Abdu'l-Bahá. So I feel I have a particular mission on top of my job here in my residence here. So I will pass it over to my cohort, Jessica.
I serve as program coordinator here. It's been 2.5 years now, so I came in just a bit behind Frank. I grew up in the Midwest, so I grew up attending New Helen, which I dearly, dearly love. And I had only been to Green Acre once before I moved here. I came here one time for an institute gathering. And in the Midwest, I knew Abdu'l-Bahá had been here, but that's all I knew about Green Acre. And as soon as I got here, I read Green Acre on the Piscataqua, and my jaw was just continually dropping, learning about the importance of this place and just the rich history of this place. And it is such an honor to be here that I'm like, is this real? Is this real? I don't think this is real. This can't be real. So yeah, I'm very, very honored to be here, and I will pass it to Tim.
Well, I'm a Western states person, so I first became a Bahá in the 70s, but I didn't get to Green Acre until the early 90s as a part of the preparations for the World Congress. We had some meetings there, and that was my first experience. And my only other experience of being somewhere where Abdu'l-Bahá had stood was in Los Angeles at the grave of Thornton Chase, the first American Baha'i. And later returned to Green Acre on a few occasions to shoot video for various reasons. And I'm looking forward to going back again. So let's see, Anne.
Oh, well, I'll share a few things.
And
Let's
Clavin.
have Al. We'll have Al and Heather.
Oh, Heather.
Before I share. Go ahead,
Okay.
Heather.
Oh.
Oh, you're muted.
You're still muted, Heather.
Oh dear. Sorry, I became a Baha'i in early 1974. I didn't go to Green Acre until 1981 when I was married and had a 1-year-old, and I loved it. Had wanted to go all that time. At that time, I lived in Montreal. Now I live in Ottawa, and we came back with like more and more children over time, and then after the children left home, we still came, and we came to some winter schools and some summer schools, and the feeling there is just tremendous. That's just to have the view, and the air itself is just sweet to be there, and I'd love to go again. And who is missing? Al?
Al.
Yes, Al, please.
I'd like to start just by thanking you, Anne, very much for putting this all together and
Yes.
bringing back all this history, and also appreciation to the readers and people to Tim for all the technical backup. As far as association with Green Acre goes, I don't have a great deal to add to what Joni said. I became a Baha'i at Nowruz, 1967, in the home of the McClellans in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and visited Green Acre, I guess, or shortly after that, and have good memories of bringing our kids there when they were young, and some of them, as mentioned earlier, still have close friends. One of them married someone they met at Green Acre. Some of you may know who I'm talking about. We feel very happy to be now living so close to it, and look forward to visiting personally more frequently as the conditions improve.
Thank you all so much. What a special group. And I know Rob had to leave early for another meeting, and Masood and Helen aren't with us, but I just want to say about them, because you probably all know Rob Stockman and what he's doing with Wilmette Institute and everything. Masood and Helen are both amazing artists. And I've really connected to Helen through the Green Acre art programs that they've had the last few months, which have been stellar. And I so admired her. I've never met her in person. And Masood, I've seen perform as Frederick Douglass recently. He's an amazing orator and performer. So I was thrilled when he said yes. I asked him to be a reader, and he said, of course. I'll serve. So
and Clavin too.
Oh, Anne, go ahead. It's your turn. I'm sorry.
I was enjoying it. My family and I moved up to Green Acre, Dover, New Hampshire in 1981 to be close to Green Acre. And in 1985, we started the Sarah Farmer Women's Center. And we met. It was a devotional setting monthly at Fellowship House. We did that for, I think, a few years. And it was the beginning of devotionals, and it was always something I look forward to. And people came from many states, and I really look upon those days favorably. And my late husband Kevin was on the beginning of the task force for the restoration of Green Acre. He was the engineer. And so we lived in that area to serve Green Acre. And I look forward to coming back. When the pandemic ran over this summer, I just pouted again. I was like, so at least I got the feel of Green Acre today. It really, I felt like I was there, and I was imagining sitting on the porch. And so thank you, everyone. That was, I feel like summer happened. I was at Green Acre.
Thank you, Anne. I have such good memories of you in Dover and in Elliott, of course. So I'll tell my story briefly. It was set 1978. I picked up a copy of East West Journal and read about Sarah Farmer and Green Acre in an article by Robert Atkinson. And so my heart started pounding, and I said, I have to go there. And that very summer, I drove up to Green Acre, and for what I thought was going to be 3 weeks, but I stayed 4 years. And I married Robert Atkinson, and together we started working on this research for the book. And Mildred Mataheta swooped in and said, honey, we need to make a book. And she gave us some seed money. And at any rate, the marriage didn't survive, but this did. And Bob and I are still good friends. And, in fact, we've been in consultation recently. He does a Story Commons website to collect stories of people. And that's really wonderful. Green Acre, I don't know why.
I just want to say, every time Ann Perry goes to Green Acre, she leaps from the car, falls to the ground, and kisses the earth.
I do. I've kissed it through the rain, through the snow, through the mud.
Recognizes its hallowed ground.
I don't know why my heart just became so connected so quickly, and Sarah tapped me on the shoulder, and I'm sure I'm an unworthy recipient, but at any rate, trying to do what I can, because the future is very exciting. And I know Larry and I both wish we could teach in the humanities division of the Montsalvat University. We were all hopeful that would happen before we die, but we may end up from the next world inspiring those who will be doing that.
A little patience is needed.
A little patience is needed. maybe a lot of patience.
Well, thank you all again so much for a wonderful evening. I think most of us at least, learned a ton. Some of us already knew it all, but was so inspiring and informative and heart-opening and inspiring twice. So thank you all. Thank you, Anne. We hope to see you all back here again next month. And you can go to our website to register at greenacre.org. And blessings to you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Bye.